moment. Nelson Mandela turns 90 in a couple of weeks. He is someone with whom you've been extremely close over the years. I wanted you to say a word about what he has meant not only to South Africa, to the world, but also to say something about what he's meant to you personally.
Well, I think the importance of his life for all of us is that first of all, he proved that he really did give up his freedom in almost a full third of his life so that everybody could be free, including his oppressors. He paid as high a price as you can pay without getting killed for it to prove that freedom has to be a universal commodity. And then he governed in a way that was consistent with what he said. Everybody knows, for example, that he invited his jailers to his inauguration. Not as many people know that he put the leaders of all the groups that oppressed him into his cabinet. And keep in mind, he was elected with 2/3 of the vote, so he did not have to do that. There is no constitutional system in the world that would have required him to do it. He did it because he knew that the country could not govern without the skills and knowledge and the psychological balance that would be provided by doing that. So he did that. That's the first thing he did. The second thing he did, which is very important in the Mugabe case, is to show us that you don't have to be in office to do public service. You can do much public good as a private citizen, and your ability to do it is enhanced if you leave office as required by the laws of your country with good grace, and then you use the stature you acquired from having held the job to try to continue to be of public service. And he did it in his later years when no one would have blamed him if he had retreated to that amazing game preserve he has up that a friend of his built him a house in northern South Africa. And the third thing he did was to show us all how to live. That's the thing he meant most to me about. I mean, he just, he really did realize that if you read his memoirs, I wrote about this in my book, but he said, I told him that the day he was released for the last time, and you may all remember it was beautifully staged for television in a way. It was on an early Sunday morning in the United States, and he took one long walk and down a dusty road, went through a gate, and then got in the car and rode away. I said to him, now tell me the truth. I said, I know you're a great man, but you're also a great politician. And you did the right thing getting all those people in your government, but when you were taking those last steps, didn't you really relive those 27 years, and didn't you hate them again? He said, sure I did. It's great, you reach a certain age and you're not running for anything, you can pretty well say what you want. And he said, sure I did. For a moment I did. He said, I felt anger and hatred and fear. And I realized that if I kept hating them once I got in that car and got through the gate, I would still be in prison. So I let it go because I wanted to be free. There is every living soul on the planet has some often highly justified anger. Everybody. And just learning that you have to practice. And by the way, I said this at his birthday. I'm probably one of the few people who's actually seen him mad on more than one occasion. It's just like if you know anybody who was ever a POW for any length of time, you will see that you go along for months or maybe even years, and then something will happen that'll trigger all those bad dreams, and they'll come back, and it may not last 30 seconds. Look, that's the thing that makes his life so monumental. It's not like all that stuff just went away. But he disciplined himself and his mind and his heart and his spirit to always work to constantly overcome it every day. And I think in some ways, when you look at how we're going to, what will happen in the aftermath of Mugabe's going. There will be an enormous, let's suppose the best of all worlds happened and he woke up tomorrow and he says, I've had a terrible attack of conscience. I'm tired of this general running me. I don't care how old I am. I have some good sense left. I'm out of here. Goodbye. I love my country. I wish you well. Think of all the people on the other side who would be tempted to go kill other people. I mean, this is a universal lesson that all of us have to keep struggling with in our lives. So I think he proved freedom has to be a universal commodity. He served with enormous distinction out of office as well as in. And he taught us a lot about how all of us should be trying to live. And that's for those three things are why I think he, along with Itzhak Rabin, are the two most remarkable people I ever knew.
You worked very closely with him on HIV/AIDS. Say something about his own experience with that, with his own family, but also your partnership with him.
Well, it's interesting. Mandela met a woman who, not South African. When we were at the AIDS conference in Barcelona in 2002, at that time, in the entire world, if you had HIV and it blew into AIDS and you needed medicine to stay alive, if you were in America or Europe or Japan or Canada, you could get it. If you were in a poor country or even an emerging economy, almost nobody was on medicine and people were just dying. There were 6 million people then almost who needed the medicine to stay alive, and only 200,000 were getting it. 130,000 of those people were in Brazil, where the government, under a brilliantly conceived and executed program by the then president, Fernando Henrique Cardoso, figured out how not only to get this medicine, but to actually get it to people in a way that they could take it. Whole rest of the world, 70,000 people. So Mandela was trying to both convince the South African government to abandon a totally untenable position that they didn't need the medicine, and also trying to convince the world to raise more money. Keep in mind, this was before the president's PEPFAR program had been passed, and after the Global Fund on AIDS, TB, and malaria had been stood up, but before it was funded. So Mandela and I were asked to go there in a very different world, where we were supposed to be head of a group of people, used-to-be's like us, who were supposed to hit on people who still had money to give it. Governments, basically. That's why they asked us to close the session. But I was overwhelmed because he talked about this woman, this young woman who was lived in the Pacific, in one of the Pacific Island countries. I can't even remember which one now. And he had run across her at an AIDS meeting, and he was so moved by her that he personally saw to it that his foundation paid for the medicine to keep this girl alive so she could go out and be a spokesperson. Now, that might not sound like much to you now, but the medicine was terrifically expensive then, and this girl was not even African. She had not even anywhere on the continent. He just did it because he thought, one, he was moved by her as a human being, and secondly, he wanted her to be out there as a beacon to other people. So he said to me, he said, you know, this is what you ought to be doing. And it became obvious to me that when President Bush got the extra money and then the Global Fund was funded, which is really great, and more people were putting up money, that most people were going to keep dying because the medicine was too expensive and there were no delivery systems. So that's how we got into doing what we do. And now, since that time, there are about 3 million people in the world on medicine now, so 2.8 million have been added, and 1.4 million get the medicine off the contracts that our foundation has negotiated, which are the world's least expensive programs, including, thanks to the French-led group Unitaid, about 150,000 more young children who have to have the pediatric AIDS medicine. But I started thinking about it there when I was just looking at him, and I thought, here's this guy, how old was he in 1994? He's 90 now, what, 83? He's there writing a check so a young girl that he would may never see again from the Pacific Ocean region can live her life and be a model. He's an astonishing man.